Some people say it was fluke, others that it was absolute genius. But here's the thing, there are actually signs that help us read what the player was really thinking about, and I'm going to reveal those signs later on. But first, let's talk about this situation. We are facing this easy 5 ball with practically no angle, and we need to get shape on the 6 ball, which is located right here. The biggest problem makes the 8 ball, which blocks access to this corner pocket for the 6 ball, but I think this wouldn't be a problem for most players who would try to make a position for 6-8 combination. The key is to land as straight as possible for that combo, because leaving too much of an angle can result in a miss or losing position for the 6 ball. The situation would be much simpler if we remove the 7 ball, because then we could draw the cue ball back towards the head string and play the 6 ball into the left side pocket. Playing a 6-8 combo seems to be the only option available, but now, let's see what Eklund Kachi does in exactly the same situation.
At the start of it all.
He plays very aggressively with a lot of topspin and guides the cue ball 2 rails to an extremely small position area for the 6 ball to the top right corner. Some people might say it was a big fluke and he simply missed positioning for the combo, but I am absolutely sure that such skilled players do not make such big mistakes. However, we have to stay with this situation a little longer, because after pocketing the 6 ball, Eklund leaves the cue ball in the middle of the table, where he will play the 7 ball in the next step. In this case, I'm pretty sure most players would choose to play a very soft shot with low left spin to leave the cue ball somewhere in that area, using only 1 rail. Another group of players would decide to play a 2-rail positioning to a very similar area, which would also be quite a good and promising choice. So let me ask you, did Eklund choose any of those solutions? The answer is quite surprising, because he decides to make a much more aggressive shot by guiding the cue ball 2 rails, but does it behind the left side pocket. This shot required a lot of confidence to avoid a scratch in the side pocket, but look how much benefit he gained by leaving the cue ball with perfect shape on the 8 ball. This what he did twice in this situation is something amateurs almost never even consider. And now here's where it gets more interesting, because the next situation is even less intuitive, and if you ask most amateurs, they would probably say this is the wrong shot. We are on this quite a thin cut on the 6 ball, and the next 7 ball is right here. This positioning seems quite obvious, and I am almost certain that most people would choose to leave the cue ball close to the center of the table. However, we then face a rather uncomfortable positioning to the 8 ball. The ideal solution would be to land for the 8 ball with this angle, because then we can very easily set up for the 9 ball, but this is almost impossible, because we almost always leave the wrong angle, which means we have to recover. The optimal solution would be to leave the cue ball for the 7 ball in this area, because then we would face quite an easy positioning to the 8 ball, and the best method to reach this area is this 3-rail positioning. If we hit the cue ball only with topspin, it follows its natural path, and if we combine this with the right speed, we can perform this 3-rail positioning to the 7 ball. However, we are faced with the problem of speed control, because many players simply play too lightly, causing the cue ball to land very low on the table. And this is the right time to see what Johan Chua does in the exact same situation. Of course, he decides to create the right angle for the 7 ball, but he uses 4-rail positioning to do so, which almost ends up losing the position. This shot seems like a bad choice, and I'm not the right person to judge whether it was the right solution, but when I tested it myself on the table, I noticed that almost always such a large amount of right spin causes the cue ball to lose a lot of speed after contact with the third rail, and this certainly makes it quite easy to feel the speed of that attempt. In the examples I gave earlier, the cue ball was moving with its natural speed, which made it difficult to control. Johan was undoubtedly a bit lucky not to have hidden the cue ball behind the 9-ball, but I think that ultimately this solution offered the greatest possibilities and margin for error. And actually, I am really curious what you think about this choice, and I would love to see your opinion in the comments. But now, let's circle back to the signs that help us assess whether a shot was a pure fluke or a player's genius. The cue ball close to the bottom rail, the 8-ball close to the top rail, and the 9-ball near the foot spot. We don't have direct access to any pocket, and it seems that playing a safety shot is the only reasonable option. However, trying to hide the cue ball behind the 9-ball requires extremely precise contact with the 8-ball, and I am sure that in most cases we'll play too thin or too fake, which of course will cause us to sell out. The only offensive option seems to be playing a 1-rail bank shot to the bottom left corner, and I am pretty sure most more experienced players would go for exactly that shot. In fact, the only way to avoid leaving the 8-ball in an open position is to send it to the left side rail, while the cue ball is going to the right side rail, but in this case, we give the initiative completely to the opponent. So let me ask you, do you see any other solution that almost always leaves the table safe in case of a miss? And this is the right time to take a look at what Joshua Filler does in an identical situation. He decides to play a 3-rail bank shot into the right side pocket, and I'm pretty sure many of you will say this was an extreme fluke, because he really wanted to play a bank shot into the left side pocket, or he simply missed a bank shot to the bottom left corner. To find the answer, we have to go back to the moment when Josh uses his cue to indicate the 8-ball's path after contact with the bottom rail, and that is the exact moment that shows he expected this outcome.
He's played this, Phil. He's actually played that shot.
But what is even more interesting, this option turns out to be a very safe shot, because in a situation where the 8-ball follows a slightly different path, it will miss the side pocket and go towards the top rail, while the cue ball returns to the bottom of the table, leaving a safe layout. And this is the exact reason why Josh chose that solution, and it is undoubtedly a shot that pros practice, and the proof of this are the words of commentator Carl Boyce, who confirms my point of view.
He's actually played that shot. Listen, that is a shot on a pool table. You think he's fluked it. That is a shot with practice. If he misses the pot in the side pocket, it goes on the top rail.
And here is the thing, at the highest level, pros don't just hit and hope. Some shots look like fluke, and yes, there is always a small element of randomness in pool.
I just had that feeling.
But what separates pros from amateurs is that they don't rely on luck. They design for it. They always choose the path that maximizes reward, where even a miss can still leave the table safe. And you know what I think about that Z-shot? Efren Reyes wasn't going for that. And no, it wasn't a fluke either. But I'm absolutely sure that the idea crossed his mind. He had other options. safer, more standard ones. But none of them gave him a real chance to make that ball. And that's exactly what wins matches in critical situations.
He's played this, Phil. He's actually played that shot.
Oh, you've got to be joking.
What do you think about it? Leave your opinion in the comments. However, if you want to stop wasting time and start improving your game, you must check out Pool Billiard CO. This is the best billiard platform where you will find structured drills, advanced editor, and using link from video description, you can get discounts from premium membership and full access to website. If you enjoyed the video, leave a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and see you in the next one. Take care!